Hi, I'm Stephen Coates and I'm a watercolour artist and professional tutor. I'm also the author of 4 watercolour books and also write articles for Leisure Painter magazine on a regular basis. When I first started painting seriously with watercolours about 25 years ago, I was inspired by Ron Ranson and started using a Hake brush. I posted a video a few years ago showing you how I use one of these. Now, before we go any further, I received many messages criticising me for the pronunciation of the word hake. As I was reminded, the word is of Japanese origin, and in that area of the world it should probably be pronounced hake or haki even. However, I have always known it as a hake, but of course you can pronounce it however you wish. I realised I had a need for a smaller version of this brush and asked the boss at the Pro Arty Brush Company if it was possible to make a 3/4 inch or 20mm version with a traditional handle and flat ferrule. Of course, it needed to be made with the same soft goat hair as the traditional Japanese style brush. But he set to work and produced this beautiful brush, which we decided to call the Mini Hake. So there it is. As you can see, it's got the goat hair brush head with the flat crimped metal ferrule and the black handle, traditional black handle. Now, the beauty about this brush is that it changes when it's wet. So at the moment this is dry. This is my working brush. At the moment it's quite dry. If you turn it sideways, you can see the brush head is sort of quite fat. Let me just put that in some water, give that a good soak in water like that. I'm just going to give it a little squeeze just so that you can see now sideways on how sharp that is on the brush tip itself. So I'm bringing this back to you now fully loaded again with water, and you can see the brush head has swollen back up to the state it was in when it was dry. It's got an enormous amount of water in it. But the soft, delicate nature of this brush head means that I can now deliver this water onto the paper with barely touching the paper. The water will just flow out. So the touch with this brush is an incredibly delicate one. The Mini Hake is available exclusively from me and can be found on my website www.coatesart.co.uk. You will be quite surprised to find that at the time of filming it is only about £10, which makes it incredible value for money. You're unlikely to find a brush of this quality anywhere else. Now, my website is only set up for UK orders, but if you are an international visitor, it is possible to arrange shipping using a PayPal account. All you need to do is send me an email so that I can quote you for the shipping to wherever you are. And the email address is on the screen now. The Mini Hake is incredibly versatile as well, and you can produce a whole range of brush strokes with it, depending on the action, the angle and the level of water in the brush head. I'm going to do a painting for you now using the Mini Hake and nothing else. It will be in quite a loose impressionistic style and will only take a few minutes. So hold on to your hats and be prepared for something really exciting. So I've taped down a piece of Bockingford 140 pounds or 300 grams per square metre. This is the knot or cold pressed, however you want to say it. This is 13 inches by 9 inches, just a little bit bigger than A4. So before we embark on the painting, I just want to quickly show you this sketch that I've prepared. This is just, as you can see, a very basic sort of water scene with quite a dramatic sky. I want to leave lots of light in the sky here. So I'm going to try and leave a little bit of really pale, almost a bit of white paper showing through, and lots of dark, more thundery clouds higher up. Got these distant mountains in here, distant islands perhaps, a couple of these areas of land coming in from the edges, nicely balanced with a focal point here, and then this sort of dry beachy area in the foreground. Now, the important thing just to note here is that the reflections of these two bits of land, the darker bits, the foreground land coming in here, the reflections, I want to get those in so that they're really soft. So they'll need to go in right at the beginning during the first wash before I actually paint the bits of land in. All that will become clear as we progress. So the colours I'm going to use, I'm just going to use some raw sienna and some burnt sienna, and I'm going to use a plum colour, which is this one here. So that's the raw. I've got a blob of raw sienna. Forgive the mess of my palette. My palettes always look like this. This is a fresh blob of raw sienna, fresh blob of burnt sienna, and then this is a mix of ultramarine and light red. It's one of probably my most favourite and most used colours, especially when I do skies. This is actually really thick as well, so it's got the consistency of oil, because I'm going to wet the paper first. I don't want the paints on the palette to be really runny, because if I put runny paints into a wet surface, the whole thing will just kind of explode and I'll lose control of it. So pre-wetting with strong paints. So here's the brush, the Mini Hake that we've been looking at, and as I promised, I'm going to do the whole painting with this. So I've given that a thorough soak. You can see that the brush just sweeps across the paper. I don't know how much of a shine you can see on the film there, but I've got 3 full brush loads of water now from my water pot, and the idea really is I just run the brush up and down and spread the water out so that it's even, so that I haven't got pockets of water in one place and dry areas in another. You can also hopefully see there that I'm getting the tape wet so that it doesn't dry from the edges. So people often ask me, how much water should I put on the paper? The answer is I can't really tell you. If you've got too much on, when you apply the paint, it will just run to the bottom. If you haven't got enough on, the paint will be static. So it's just a case of practicing this until you get it right. So I've just picked up a little bit of raw sienna, and I'm literally going to kind of flick the brush. This is a really gentle sort of flicky action. And I'm just flicking a little bit of raw sienna all the way through, and I'm leaving a nice sort of white area in here. Not put much paint here, and just put a little bit of this raw sienna across the bottom as well. So I'm going straight to the burnt sienna. I'm not going to wash the brush out. I don't want any additional water on this now. Pick up a little bit of that, and this will give it a slightly sort of orangey look here and there, just coming through. It blends beautifully with raw sienna. Again, fairly sort of patchy, and let's put a little bit in the area of water as well at the bottom. This is, bear in mind, this is the sort of area of the marsh, the wet marsh in the foreground. And then I'm just tiny bit of the plum, just to start off, not too much. And I'm just going to literally create a sort of cloud pattern that's coming down and into the picture from the top. So these are just little turns of the wrist, just dropping the paint in. I need to move on with this quickly, so I'm going to increase the amount of this plum colour now from the top. Let's have some stronger paint from this side. The idea really now is that I get this on. Let's just have a little trail of a little cloud here and there lower down, just coming into that light area, finishing the sky off now with this dark stuff. So I want the water on what I was just going to say then. I want the water on the paper to develop this paint once I've finished with the brush. So I'm just going to basically get that in and then leave it alone, and that will blend off all by itself, hopefully. Let's just have a little cloud or two down here, just a suggestion. And I'm also just going to put a little bit of that plum colour, just very gently run a bit of that into the area of water as well. I did flick a little bit more paint in here, just to close that gap up a little bit. That's looking really good, and it's still damp, and I want to get these reflections of these sort of land masses that are coming in from the edge. I want to get those in, so I've just got to choose where they're going to be. So I'm going to pick up some of the plum. I've just pulled it across the corner of the brush, and now I'm just going to angle the brush to one side like this and pull it across like this. Now this wants to taper off, so I'm bringing it away. Taper off, it wants to come across the centre and then taper away like that. We'll just widen that a little bit. So that will form the reflection of that right hand landmass, and a little bit on this one, which is down here, and this is quite don't want this to come as far across, about there. A little bit more paint. It only wants to come to about there. I don't want that to be too far down. That leaves a nice space in the middle just there. So that'll do for that. Let me just pull that across a little bit. That's just fading. But you can see that's nice and soft and fuzzy and blurry in this area at the bottom, which is still wet. So that's been resting for about 2 minutes now, and as you can see, it's still got a shine on it. You can see it reflecting off the light here. So that early question about how much water should I put on the paper, enough for me to have a couple of minutes to get the paint on and for it to still be wet like this all over, so that it gets a chance to develop the paint. You can clearly see how this paint now is softening. The edges of the clouds are blurring. The paint, the light red and the ultramarine mix is separating and granulating on the paper. It's just a gorgeous effect. And we've still got this lovely area of light shining through, which will right in the focal point of the picture. So I'm going to dry that off now with the hairdryer. Okay, that's completely dry now. So along here, I want these distant sort of islands, and I want those to be really pale. I want them to look really distant. So I'm just going to take some of this plum and just pop it to one side. I'm going to add some water to this to really thin it out, and make sure the brush is full. But I'm going to test that first just to make sure it's the right intensity. It's always a good idea to test the paint before you commit to the paper. That's nice and pale, nice and loose, so that'll do nicely for these distant islands. So I've got to paint one first. So whereabouts? So I'm going to put it about here so that I've got a little bit of white underneath it, which will represent reflections from the white area of the sky. So as you can see, I'm just using the trailing corner of the brush, and I'm moving it along in one direction. I'm very keen not to go back and touch that again, because that paint will settle off really nicely there. Same again now. That's dried off quite nicely. This one I'm going to have a little bit stronger, so I've just added a little bit of paint to it so that it's just that's not enough, obviously. Just a little bit more intensity in the paint there, and that means I can bring this now slightly in front of the other one, just so it looks like it's creeping across there in front of it. Again, just pulling the brush across, using the trailing corner, and we'll pull that in there, and that will disappear then behind the other one as it comes in. That's far enough. So now I've got to plunge back into the stronger of the plum mix now to do these near side bits of land. So as you can see, we've got the extra intensity. So I'll come down in from the right, cut the brush across to get a nice flat edge at the bottom, and we'll pull that through, and this one wants to come all the way through into here. I had planned on it going a little bit further, so let's do that. There we go, that's coming to a taper there, and we'll just make sure that that's even. A little drop at the end, and make sure that's flat on the underside. That's okay. So we've got that piece of land coming in from the right, and let's just have it a little bit wider like that, and we've got a reflection of it now, nice soft reflection of it. We'll do exactly the same on this side, and this one, as we'd planned earlier, is much shorter, so I'm not going to bring that. It needs to come across there just to cover that bit, and we'll have that coming in across there like that, just coming to and again a nice sharp end. Just got a little dip on the end of that one. Let me just sort that out. Right, so at the very bottom of the foreground here now, I want to just represent, I said I wanted this to be fairly impressionistic. I want to just get a foreground in now. So I've taken quite a lot of water out of this brush because it's important now that this is not too wet. I'm going to pick up some burnt sienna, and this is quite sort of resistant, it's quite stodgy. And the reason for that is because I want to pull the brush across, get it down at quite a low angle, and I want to scrape it across the paper. And I don't want the water to flow. I want it to create this broken effect, which will look like a sort of semi-submerged marshy area right across the foreground. You can see how the bumps on the paper create the texture for you. It's just important that the brush isn't too wet so it doesn't flow. And these are nice, strong, energetic brush strokes, pulling all the way across from either side, whichever way you want to go. And you can see that's really effective. So that's the sort of the base coat of that. Let me just dry that. Now that's dry, I'm going to do exactly the same with the plum. So I've just found an area at the side where it's quite dry. Be careful not to put too much in here because I don't want to suddenly overpower it. But again, same principle, pulling the brush across to create these darker lines which are broken. This is often referred to as dry brushing, and you can see why. So this darker paint that I've laid down over the top of the original burnt sienna, what that does is it gives that foreground now some real intensity and some depth. I think that'll do quite nicely. So that's great because that actually just looks like a beach that's got the water, it's very shallow water and it's crept up. You can see little stones and bits of gravel or whatever just poking their heads up above the surface of the water. Really effective. Just another fantastic thing that you can do with this brush. Now then, might as well do this while that's wet. While the brush is quite dry, I want to show you another fantastic technique with this brush. So I don't know whether you can see, just get the camera angle right. I'm sort of pulling the brush down like that and bending it. So the brush has got a bend in it. And what that's done is it's opened up the bristles. So they, hopefully you can see, they're quite sort of spiky on the end. And I'm going to paint some reeds. And this is done literally by flicking the brush downwards like that. Maybe just a touch dry. Let's just try that again. There we go. A lot of people would think that you'd go upwards, but actually that doesn't tend to work as well. It's much better. And what we do is we pull the brush down, bring it into contact with the paper with a nice gentle flick, and we'll create some reeds, some reed beds along here. So let's have a go at doing that. I'm going to try and get them a little bit uneven. A little bit more intensity over here on the right. So that's looking pretty good. Let's have another little one back here. So just a little bit further out. A little reed bed in there as well. Maybe just there too. You see how effective that is. A little bit more intensity here and there. Spot on, that's lovely. That's lovely. And again, I'm going to use the brush again to put a couple of, there's an old jetty over here on the left. So now what I've done is I've added more water to the paint. I've straightened the brush head off again now, so it's nice and sharp. There's no spike, you can't see any spikes now on the brush tip, it's smooth again. And I'm literally going to just drop the brush down like this and touch. And this puts in some wooden stakes or fence posts from what was maybe an old jetty or something like that over here on the left hand side. I'm going to put a smaller one in by just angling the brush up a touch. Let's just have another small one over there. There we go. And these will want a reflection as well, so I'm literally going to use turn the brush upright like this, and I'll just put a little reflection in and a little ripple, broken reflection in for these posts. All adds to the effect, showing that this is water down here. So that's it basically. That looks like a really lovely peaceful scene. I could put birds in this or various other features, but of course I did promise that I would do the whole painting with the Mini Hake. So there's the finished painting, and there is quite a lot of mess around the edge on the tape, which is quite a distraction. So as ever, when you put a mount on a piece of work, it makes it look finished and makes it look about 10 times better. So I hope you've enjoyed that and you've been inspired, and I'll see you again on another video. So there it is, the Mini Hake in action. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. If you've been inspired, please do let me know, or better still, visit the website and place an order. Many thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.